The dust road shimmered beneath the late morning sun, stretching endlessly toward the horizon like a pale scar carved into the land. Cassidy tightened her grip on the reins as her mule picked its way forward, hooves crunching softly against dry gravel and baked earth. She had traveled this road before many times, in fact, but never without a familiar escort or the comfort of a known destination waiting at the end. Today was different. Her medical satchel bumped against her hip with each step, heavy with herbs, bandages, tinctures, and tools she had gathered over years of hard-earned experience. Inside, it lived the quiet hope of new beginnings, babies crying their first breaths into a harsh world. But Cassidy knew too well that the road to new life was often lined with danger, grief, and fear. She adjusted the brim of her hat, scanning the open plains. Somewhere beyond the distant ridgeline lay Copper Ridge, a scattered settlement that had sent word weeks ago. A woman there was heavy with child and nearing her time. Cassidy had promised she would come. Promises mattered to her. A low rumble of hooves pulled her from her thoughts. Cassidy turned, heart tightening as she spotted a lone rider approaching from behind. He rode a dark bay horse with a measured, steady gait. No wasted motion, no panic. The rider himself sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, his posture alert but controlled. Cassidy slowed her mule and rested a hand near the small revolver hidden beneath her shawl. The man drew closer, dust swirling around his boots as he reined in beside her. His face was weathered, carved by sun and wind, with sharp eyes that missed very little. A rifle was strapped across his back, worn but well cared for. "Road's not safe today," he said, voice low and even. "Outlaw gangs been spotted east of here." Cassidy studied him carefully. "That's so." He nodded once. "Name's Wade. I'm drovin' cattle north. Was told I'd be a fool to ride alone through this stretch." She raised an eyebrow. "Funny, I was told the same." A flicker of something amusement perhaps passed through his eyes. "You headed to Copper Ridge?" "Yes." She hesitated. "I'm a midwife." That earned her a longer look. Wade's gaze softened, just slightly. "Then, folks, there are lucky you're cumin." Cassidy relaxed a fraction, though she kept her guard up. "And you?" "Just passin' through." He glanced toward the open land ahead. "Road's bad for the next 2 days. If you don't mind company, we'd both stand a better chance, ridden together." Cassidy considered his offer. She had crossed paths with kind men and cruel ones alike. Survival had taught her to trust her instincts more than appearances. Something about Wade felt steady, like a fence post driven deep into the earth. "All right," she said finally. "But we set the pace together." He tipped his hat. "Fair enough." They rode side by side, silence settling between them like a cautious truce. The wind tugged at Cassidy's shawl, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant smoke. Every mile they traveled felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself was testing their resolve. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road, Cassidy realized this journey would be unlike any she had taken before. Not just because of the danger, but because of the man riding beside her. And though she did not yet know it, this road would carry more than just fear and survival. It would carry the promise of something neither of them had been looking for. They made camp just before dusk, choosing a shallow dip in the land where scrub brush and a few bent mesquite trees offered cover from the open plain. Wade dismounted first, movements efficient and quiet, his eyes already scanning the horizon. Cassidy watched him as she slid from her mule, noting how his hand never strayed far from his sidearm. "You always this cautious?" she asked, unloading her bedroll. "Only when breathin' matters," he replied. She gave a faint smile and began arranging her supplies. The routine soothed her fire first, then water, then a modest meal. She had learned long ago that order was a kind of armor. Wade gathered deadwood and built a small fire, keeping it low. As the flames flickered to life, the land around them seemed to exhale, the heat of the day slowly loosening its grip. Coyotes yipped, somewhere far off, their cries thin and haunting. Cassidy stirred a tin of beans, while Wade checked the perimeter. When he returned, he sat across from her, the firelight throwing sharp shadows across his face. "You've been doing this long?" he asked. "Long enough to stop counting years," she said. "Long enough to know babies don't care if the world is safe when they decide to arrive." He nodded thoughtfully. "Takes grit, what you do. Not many willing to ride into places others are running from." She met his gaze. "Someone has to." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Then Wade spoke again, quieter this time. "Outlaws I mentioned, they don't just rob. They leave a mess behind." Cassidy's fingers tightened around her tin cup. "I've seen what men like that leave behind." "Then you understand why we keep watches tonight." "I do." They took turns resting, each guarding the other's sleep. When it was Cassidy's watch, the world seemed unnervingly still. The stars burned bright above, uncaring and eternal. She found herself listening, not just for danger, but for Wade's breathing behind her steady, grounding. At some point near dawn, hoofbeats echoed faintly across the land. Cassidy froze. She rose slowly, nudging Wade awake with her boot. His eyes opened instantly, hand already reaching for his rifle. "Riders," she whispered. They extinguished the fire and moved behind the brush. Horses held quiet. 3 silhouettes passed along the ridge to the east, moving fast and careless. Wade waited until the sound faded before exhaling. Too close. Cassidy's heart pounded. Outlaws, most likely. When the sun finally broke the horizon, they were already moving again. The land grew rougher as the day wore on rocky gullies, narrow passes where sound carried too far. Cassidy's mule stumbled once, and Wade was at her side in an instant, steadying the animal. "Careful," he said gently. She looked up, startled by the concern in his voice. "Thank you." By midday, the heat returned with a vengeance. Cassidy wiped sweat from her brow, her steps slowing despite her will. Wade noticed. "Water break," he said, halting. She protested weakly, but he handed her his canteen anyway. Their fingers brushed, and the contact lingered just a moment too long. "You don't look like someone who lets others decide for her," he said quietly. "I don't," she replied. "But I also know when to accept help." That earned her another of those almost They rode on, tension tightening with every mile. Cassidy felt it in her bones. The sense that the road ahead would demand more than endurance. It would demand trust, and though she didn't say it aloud, she was beginning to trust Wade more than she ever expected. The cry came just after noon. It cut through the dry air, sharp and desperate, carried on the wind from somewhere beyond the ravine ahead. Cassidy reined in hard, her mule snorting in protest. "That's a woman," she said immediately. Wade had already dismounted, eyes narrowed toward the sound, "and she's Hertor, close to it." Cassidy didn't hesitate. She swung down and gathered her satchel. "Then we don't have time to debate." "Outlaw territory," Wade warned. "Could be a trap." Cassidy met his gaze, fierce and unyielding. "Or it could be someone in labor, with no one to help her. Either way, I'm going." For a long moment, Wade studied her. Then he slung his rifle over his shoulder. "Then I'm going with you." They moved carefully down into the ravine, Wade leading, Cassidy close behind. The ground was uneven, littered with loose stones that threatened to give them away with every step. The cries grew louder, breaking into sobs. They found her beneath a leaning cottonwood, young dirt-streaked, her dress soaked dark at the hem. She clutched her belly, eyes wild with pain and fear. "Please," the woman gasped. "It's too soon." Cassidy knelt beside her, without a second thought. "I'm here. You're not alone." She checked quickly, hands steady, mind racing. The baby was coming, whether the mother was ready or not. And the bleeding worried her. Wade, Cassidy said calmly, though her heart hammered. "I need clean water, and keep watch." He nodded, and moved without question, positioning himself where he could see both the ravine and the ridge above. Cassidy worked swiftly, murmuring reassurance as she guided the woman through each contraction. Sweat beaded on Cassidy's brow, but her hands never shook. She had done this dozens of times, but never this exposed, never with danger so close it felt like a breath on her neck. A sudden shout echoed from above. Wade stiffened. Company, he called softly. Cassidy swallowed fear and focused harder. Just a little longer, she urged the mother. You're doing beautifully. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Wade raised his rifle, heart pounding, eyes locked on the figures approaching. 2 men appeared on the ridge, ragged, armed. Their intent clear. Move along, Wade shouted. This don't concern you, they laughed. Then, the baby cried, the sounds, furious, alive, cut through everything. Cassidy lifted the newborn, relief flooding her chest. It's a boy, she whispered. Something shifted. One of the men hesitated, glancing at the child. Wade didn't wait. He fired a warning shot into the dirt, dust exploding at their feet. Last chance. The men cursed and retreated, disappearing as quickly as they'd come. When it was over, Cassidy wrapped the baby in her shawl and placed him against his mother's chest. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she laughed weakly. You saved us, she said. Cassidy shook her head. We all did. Wade approached, gaze fixed on the infant. His expression softened in a way Cassidy hadn't seen before. Wonder mingled with something deeper. Life's stubborn, he murmured. Even out here. They escorted the woman to a nearby homestead before continuing on. As the sun dipped low, Cassidy felt the weight of the day settle over her. Later, as they rode in silence, Wade finally spoke. Most folks would have turned away. Cassidy looked at him. Most folks don't carry new life in their hands every day. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passing between them. The road stretched on, but it no longer felt quite so empty. The land flattened as they rode westward, the ravine giving way to open stretches of sun-bleached grass and scattered rock. The danger of the morning lingered in the air, an invisible weight pressing down on every sound and movement. Cassidy felt it in her shoulders, in the way Wade's gaze never stopped sweeping the horizon. They didn't speak much at first. Words felt unnecessary after what they had witnessed after. The cry of new life had echoed through outlaw territory and somehow changed the shape of the day. By mid-afternoon, the heat grew heavy again. Wade called for another stop near a shallow creek, barely worthy of the name. Cassidy knelt to wash her hands, scrubbing away dried blood and dust. The water ran pink for a moment, before clearing. You all right? Wade asked. She nodded. I will be. He leaned against a rock, watching her with quiet intensity. You don't carry what you've seen lightly. No, she said softly. But I carry it willingly. They shared a simple meal. Cassidy noticed how Wade always gave her the better portion without comment. How he positioned himself between her and the open land. Protection without possession. It stirred something in her chest she hadn't felt in years. As they rode again, the sky darkened unexpectedly. Thick clouds rolled in, bruised purple and gray, casting long shadows across the trail. Storm's brewin', Wade said. We should find shelter. They spotted an abandoned line shack. Just as the first drops fell, its roof sagging, door hanging loose on one hinge. It wasn't much, but it was something. They hurried inside as rain began to pound the earth. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the walls. Cassidy jumped despite herself. Wade noticed. Been through worse, she said quickly. I know, he replied. Doesn't mean it don't still startle you. Lightning flashed, illuminating the small space. For a heartbeat, they stood too close. The air charged with more than electricity. Cassidy stepped back, clearing her throat. We'll wait it out. They sat opposite each other, the storm roaring around them. The forced stillness brought memories to the surface. My husband died on a road like this, Cassidy said suddenly. The word surprised her as much as him. Fever took him. I was too far from help. Wade's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. So was I, for a long time. She looked down at her hands. But grief has a way of teaching you how to keep moving. Wade hesitated, then spoke. I lost a boy once. Not my own, but one I was meant to protect. Cassidy looked up, eyes gentle. You couldn't save him. No. His voice was rough. And it's followed me ever since. Thunder rolled again, softer now. Cassidy reached out before she could stop herself, resting her hand briefly on his. He didn't pull away. Saving lives isn't about winning every battle, she said. It's about showing up when it matters. Their fingers intertwined for just a moment. A quiet promise, neither of them named. When the storm passed, the air felt clean, reborn. They stepped back onto the road. Something shifted between them. Fragile, unspoken, but real. Copper Ridge lay only a day away, and with every mile, Cassidy sensed that whatever awaited her there. This journey with Wade was already changing her, in ways she couldn't undo. Copper Ridge emerged from the dust just after sunrise weathered. Buildings clustered together like survivors of too many hard seasons. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the distant sound of a hammer rang against wood. Life persisted here, stubborn and unyielding. Cassidy felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Every town brought the same question: how long will I stay? Her work was never finished, yet she never truly belonged. Wade slowed his horse beside her mule. "This is as far as I go," he said quietly. She nodded, though the words struck deeper than she expected. "Thank you for the road, for everything." They rode into town together anyway. Word spread quickly once folks noticed Cassidy's satchel. A man hurried toward them, hat clenched in his hands. "You, the midwife?" he asked. "My wife, she's been in labor all night." Cassidy was already dismounting. "Take me to her." The hours blurred together. Cassidy worked through exhaustion, steady and sure, while Wade waited outside the small cabin, pacing like a tethered animal. He listened to every sound, heart lodged in his throat. Then a cry. Relief flooded him. Cassidy emerged sometime later, her face tired but glowing. "A healthy girl," she said. "Mother's strong." The man wept openly. Wade found his own eyes stinging. As the day wore on, Cassidy tended to more mothers, more children, more small aches and worries. Copper Ridge needed her perhaps more than she had expected. By evening, she finally stepped outside, finding Wade seated on the porch rail, hat in his hands. "They asked me to stay," she said. He looked up, searching her face. "And I don't know," she admitted. "I've never been good at staying." Wade stood slowly. "I ain't good at asking, but I reckon roads cross for a reason." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. "I could use someone like you here," she said softly. "This place could—" Wade's breath caught. "I could try." For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Cassidy smiled, small, hopeful, real. As dusk settled over Copper Ridge, two travelers stood at the edge of a new beginning. Unsure of what tomorrow would bring, but no longer afraid to find out together. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.